Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Audition, or actually interview, the finalists of the Dragon Age Season 3 campaign. We are here with our very first interview, actually. Kallista, you are number one on
Yes,
the list. You are,
always.
yes, there you go. And as you can see, Kallista has decided to have AJ from the Wizarding World campaign be her interviewer. So, AJ, thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited.
Awesome. So, I'm just not going to waste any time and pass it on to AJ. So, it is your show, sir.
All right. Well, to all the interviewers and Kallista, I know you guys are nervous. I'm actually nervous as well. And I was super nervous back when I interviewed as Albion, but I just want to say, just be yourself. We're going to have a lot of fun. And if we mess up, we can undo and redo, and it's all part of the process. Those of you that don't know me, I do play Albion in the Harry Potter campaign, aka Wanda, occasionally. But Kallista, thank you for inviting me here today. And I think we're ready to jump in with some questions about you, not about Pasha, but some out of character questions if you are ready.
Ready as ever.
All right. So as a role player, I think you said you've been RPing for a few years now. So if you're familiar with Twitter, Twitter kind of limits the amount of letters and characters you can use. So I want a tweet version of one of your favorite characters that you've played and perhaps why. You can do a tweet for who it was and maybe a little tweet for why.
Favorite character I've played so far would be Clover. She has a crappy Irish accent because I'm terrible with those. She's very happy and very bubbly, very sweet. And she tends to get into a fair bit of trouble, as halflings do.
She sounds like a lot of fun. Switching gears to Pasha's character and thinking about it from an out-of-character standpoint, what do you feel like as a player is going to be one of your most challenging parts of Pasha to play? And how do you foresee overcoming that challenge?
I'm not used to playing older characters. I know that 45 isn't old, like, gonna say that now. But typically the characters I play are younger and slightly more inexperienced, kind of wide-eyed about the world. And while Pasha hasn't explored much of Thedas, she's stayed in her own little corner. I think she is wise. She's older, she's raised lots of children, and I think she's kind of stern. It'll sound weird, I kind of imagine her as a mix between Mary Poppins and Vivienne from Inquisition, just like mush them together. And I think it's going to be challenging for me to kind of pull off that gravitas, if you know what I mean, to have that aura. I can't really give an explicit way of how I'm going to overcome that. I think I'm just going to try and throw myself into it and hope that I achieve.
If you don't get selected for this amazing journey, what one other applicant from what you've watched do you really feel like they need to be part of Dragon Age campaign season 3, and why?
I'm going to say Dominic, who was the Darkspawn mage. The one with the really dark backstory of him eating his little sister, which I adore dark characters. I enjoy that kind of grittiness in storytelling, and so that's why I would push him forwards.
In one word, what do you think makes a great tabletop player? And in one word, what do you think makes a great GM or DM?
Team player with a hyphen, so it's one word.
Yeah.
And in a DM, I think my gut says forgiving. And that might sound a little bit weird, but I think so many DMs can be very harsh and very, no, you said this first, so that's what you're going to do. But I didn't mean it. I was thinking out loud, or I didn't have the full context. Nope, that was your first thing. You've got to do it. And I think that as everyone makes mistakes, GMs make mistakes, players make mistakes. And I think having a GM who's kind of able to basically go, it's all right, don't worry about it, let's just move forward, we can figure something out. I think that's so important.
Well, I think if you get in, you'll see that Hark is very forgiving and fair GM, so that is good. And in terms of the team player, like that's one of the reasons I was drawn to you during the Harry Potter campaign. I feel like you give that vibe. So I agree that's also very important that you've got to be a team player, and having a good team is what makes it successful. So I think awesome job answering those questions. I feel like I've gotten a better vibe for you as a player.
Thank you.
So Kallista, it's interesting that you chose forgiving for the DM, because that kind of ties in with the question I'm going to be asking. So Kallista, I've been doing these auditions / interviews for the last 6 years, I think. And that means many people have seen previous ones in the past. Other people have been in them, like yourself, in the past. So I am going to be a bit tougher with my questioning this year. So one thing I am going to be doing that is new is I'm going to be asking, what is Hark's biggest reservation for this player? And it's going to be for everyone. So I'm not just picking you in particular. Everyone's going to be in the hot seat where I honestly give them feedback as to what is it about them that gives me the biggest reservation. So for you, so you know how you play a video game or watch a TV show or movie, and this new character gets introduced, and within like the first 30 seconds, you think to yourself, oh my God, I'm going to love this character. Like instantly you're drawn to them, you're bought in, you're already invested. Just within something that they do within 30 seconds, like really pulls you in. And you did that so well during your auditions. So well. And so the biggest critique I had for you last year, which is honestly the biggest thing that kept you from the main campaign last year, is you had such a memorable audition. And then we got to your interview. And after the interview was done, I was thinking, it just wasn't as memorable as her audition. And ideally, I think this makes sense. Ideally, you want your interview to be more memorable than your audition, not the other way around.
Yeah.
This is the problem that Brandon had as well. Brandon had an excellently memorable audition. And then in his interview, when he actually put Levi in practice during his interview, it just wasn't as memorable to me. So fast forward to this year, you audition again, and again, boom. Your audition for Pasha was so memorable, and I think everybody else was talking about how well you audition and how memorable your interview is. So now that we're in your interview, I'm wondering, the big question is, can Kallista make her interview just as memorable, if not more so, than our audition? Because I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Kallista. If you can do that, you're practically in the campaign, as far as I'm concerned. If you can do that, no pressure. So
what do you mean, no pressure?
I know, now I feel pressured too. Like I can't.
That's why I said everyone's getting the hot seat. I'm going to be tough this year. So given that is my biggest reservation for you, Kallista, what is your response? How do you respond to that?
Firstly, thank you. I think any criticism is good criticism as long as it's constructive. And thank you for saying that my auditions were memorable.
They were.
I guess all I could really say is that I'm going to try my hardest to be memorable. And if it feels like I'm not being, then you know what? I'll break into a song and dance number in the back way. That would be memorable.
That would be memorable. Yes.
I had to cut a song out of my audition, which I genuinely ended with a song, and then I was like, this is too long. I'm 59 seconds over. This gets cut.
So AJ, take note. You need to add a music number break to this scene, whatever you're doing.
Oh, good.
I hope, no pressure to you. I hope you realize that there's a lot of pressure on AJ, really, more so than AJ than it is to you. But anyway.
You're doing really well, AJ. Much love. Much love.
We've got this. I've got the setting of the scene that we have set up here. is that Pasha is on her way to the same beach where she last saw Dandelion being taken away by the Tevinter slavers. You've said in your interview that she does go there, or she was going there on the anniversary. I don't know how long that continued, if she's still doing that.
Still doing that.
Perhaps it's that day. I'll let you decide that, but she's heading to that beach. It's not quite sundown, but I think business, in town is coming to a close. The day is wrapping up. It's a very nice day. You do see the sun starting to set, clear skies. And as you approach the beach, one of the first things you see kind of over the horizon are the tips of ship sails. And obviously, I think given her history, one of the first things you see, and you recognize these ships very well, that they are the same sort of sails that kind of haunt your memory of that dreaded day when Dandelion was captured.
Okay.
There's no mistake to her. They are Tevinter ships.
So as soon as she sees them, she takes a couple of steps back and she closes her eyes and she just says to herself, they're not there. They aren't there. She opens her eyes and they're still there. And she's carrying, I'm going to say this is the anniversary of Dandelion being taken. So she's carrying this big kind of like a self-bound book with all of the letters. And it slips through her hand. The papers are scattering everywhere. And she just stands there for a minute, 2 minutes. Are the ships coming closer, or are they kind of...
The ships are actually docked. She can't see a ton of details, but she does see some people coming on and off the ships, potentially some crew members. It does appear that there may even be some people that are potentially slaves on the ship. It's not too crowded there's not a ton of people. She sees 2 men in particular having a conversation. But yes, they are docked. Like I said, it's end of business day, so I think it's a safe assumption to assume, they may be wrapping up business, potentially ready to set sail.
I think at first she's walking, she's taking slow, steady steps, and then she breaks into a run. And she is running for these ships. Just like she's probably bumping into people. She's not particularly concerned about how she looks. She is just bolting for these ships, trying to get to them before they sail away.
Okay. When she gets closer, and we'll say she bumped into a few people that just kind of give her dirty looks. I don't know if she says anything to them. Like one might even kind of curse under their breath. Be careful where you're going.
She ignores it.
So she's straight to the ships. When she gets there, she realizes that, they're not like right about to leave. Like a lot of the crew is still coming on the ship, off the ship. And those 2 men that she saw, which kind of stood out to her, they're maybe dressed a little nicer than the rest of the crew. They both just kind of look at her as she approaches, kind of quizzically, like, what is this person doing? But they continue to just kind of go back to their conversation.
Upon arriving, she's probably looking around for someone who seems like they're in charge, someone who would know what business this boat has being here.
They would be wearing Tevinter clothing.
Okay.
The one is dressed in more of a darker kind of outfit, and he even has like a dark hair pulled back into like a ponytail. He definitely has the most sense of like in charge. You see him kind of barking an order here or there. And the other gentleman has more of a lighter feel to him. He's wearing kind of almost not a lime green jacket, but a nice bright green jacket, and his reddish brown hair kind of contrasts with that pretty starkly.
Pasha walks straight up to them. She squares her shoulders and she just strides towards the 2 of them. She is going to grab the man in the dark suit by the shoulder and physically turn him to her. And she's going to say to him, "What is your business here? What is this ship doing docked here? Who are you people?"
When you do that, he kind of turns and he gives you a very like dirty scowl, and he kind of like pulls back and brushes himself off, and he says, "Excuse me, and who do you think you are?" The other gentleman, meanwhile, just before you respond, the other gentleman just he looks a little shocked, but he He's just kind of standing back watching what the darker gentleman does.
I'm the person whose questions you're going to be answering. Why are you here?
He kind of just gives you like a scoff, like he says, I don't believe I answer to you, he says. And he'll actually flash a glance to the other guy and he'll say, please handle this, Killian. And he'll just start marching away. And Killian just kind of looks between you and the captain and back at you. What does Pasha do?
Pasha's following him. She just says, I'm terribly sorry, but I didn't ask to speak to the monkey. I asked to speak to the organ grinder. What are you doing here?
The gentleman in the dark clothes, at this point when he turns, he kind of pushes his coat aside and you see he's got a weapon, a rapier, or some sort of sword on his hip. And before he speaks, you feel a hand on your shoulder, and Killian actually kind of mutters under his breath so that the captain can't hear you. He says, I wouldn't do that if I were you. He says, perhaps I can help answer your questions.
She looks very, like she does not hide her emotions. She looks very conflicted. She's looking at the captain. She's looking at Killian. She's looking at the sword. And she says, kind of to both of them, she says, I am one who speaks. I am not used to having my questions be denied.
At this point, Killian kind of, in a joking manner, says, well, lucky for you, this monkey knows a few things, so maybe I've got some answers. And he'll kind of shoo off the captain, and the captain, he doesn't say anything. He just continues to turn and walk as if, he told Killian, handle this. He trusts Killian is going to handle this. So the captain leaves, and you've got Killian, the intelligent monkey, there with you. He says, so, very bold of you, courageous to kind of approach a Tevinter ship by yourself, especially one of this caliber. And at this point, you probably realize, like, this ship's pretty big, pretty well equipped, maybe even bigger than the ones that took the Dandelion from you. So there's quite a crew on there. Like,
okay,
pretty they definitely will be able to defend themselves if any group or anyone were to attack them. So he says, yeah, pretty bold of you to approach this ship of this caliber, but lucky for you, I'm in a good mood today. So who are you again? How can I help you?
You may call me Rana, she says, because I imagine she would use her title rather than what her friends call her. And she says, I wish to know why a slave ship, a Tevinter slave ship, is docked in Saharon. Who allowed this?
He just kind of shrugs, and he's been holding this kind of like log or journal of some sort, and he flips through and he says, well, as to who allowed it, I may not be at liberty to say that, but I can assure you this is a fully authorized business deal. That is what it is. We've been through all of the right channels, I assure you.
Business deal, explain. I do not understand this word. My common is somewhat lacking, I'm afraid.
He says, well, he kind of laughs. He says, a business deal. We bring the money, we get the goods. It's as simple as that. He says,
what goods?
The goods in this case are the servants. We pay for the servants come back with us, they are taken care of. Simple as that. Really, we're taking them out of some bad situations, especially this lot. He says, a lot of these soon-to-be servants were homeless, and we're giving them a home.
At this point, Pasha is probably trying to scan the area. Can she see any of these slaves being taken aboard, or
she may see like even like maybe a family, like a mother and two children, and the mom's kind of holding them, and they are a little crammed, maybe like into like benches on the dock of the ship. But they're not caged, they're not shackled. But Pasha would see these families, and they do seem very they're dirty. They don't seem like they were living in the best conditions, the ones that they had.
So it seems like they are there not against their will.
Correct.
Like they're willfully going into this ship.
Right. At least not entirely. They may seem a little like, timid or hesitant for the most part, but they're not like revolting or screaming help or anything of that nature.
Okay. Pasha will turn to him again. Where did you get these people from?
He's flipping again through his journal. He says, like I said, I'm not at full liberty to discuss that, but I can assure you this is all legal. I mean, look at them. They're quite sad, to be honest. And I promise you, the servants we have back home, they live much, much nicer than these people are living now. This is for their best interest. Why are you getting involved in this anyways?
Just because they aren't protesting doesn't mean they agree to this.
I quite disagree to that statement. The servants that work at my home, they're quite thankful for everything we've given them in terms of provisions and food and a place to live, he says.
Well, will all of these people be going to your home specifically?
Well, of course not my home specifically. I mean,
then who are you to say where they will end up?
Look, I can't tell you for sure, but I assure you that many of the people I deal with have the same stance. We come from wealthy families. We take care of these servants. For the most part, it is an improvement of life for them.
Many, not all, and for the most part. That doesn't exactly fill me with much confidence, Mr.
Mr. Appel, Killian Appel. Well, would you rather all of them be living in the conditions they were before? Would you rather all of them be living in whatever it is that this qunari code requires of them? That even if they don't choose it, and they're just treated poorly if they don't adhere to your ways, and we're rescuing them.
Rescue? You can find contentment in acceptance, Mr. Appel. Under the qun, they would be given food and clothes for free. They would simply have to work their jobs like any other person. Yet you would have them serving someone. Here they would merely have to serve the qun, which I am inclined to argue is for the betterment of society.
These particular citizens don't seem as if they've been very well taken care of.
Then clearly whoever was supposed to be educating these people have failed, and failed miserably. They should be given to new educators to help them understand the way of the world. They should not simply be sold off like cattle.
He kind of huffs. Perhaps you're right, but he'll turn to the group, and they're not too far away. I don't think they've overheard the conversation between Killian and Pasha, but he'll look at them and say, do any of you wish to go with this lady? Any of you want off this ship? No? And none of them stand up. They all just kind of look, maybe a little confused, but none of them stand up. And he'll look back at her and say, you see?
When he turns his attention, he still has his book with all of the names and information in it, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, he has the book. What's in it, is still, I think, to be determined. Okay. But he has his book. He was probably holding it out for a lot of that conversation.
Pasha is going to attempt to take it. She's just going to attempt to grab it and bring it to herself so she can actually read it.
As you go to grab it, I mean, he was kind of just holding it out. We're going to say it falls. And the moment it falls, you kind of see him turn. And there's a split second, I think, where the book is on the ground. At this point, this is maybe the first time you don't get a sense of like Killian hasn't really been, too aggressive. Like he's been pretty lighthearted. But you get sort of that same sense of like hostility you might have got from the captain when you shoulder. And Killian just kind of looks at you for that second as the book is on the ground.
She goes to pick it up.
She picks it up, and I assume she starts to at least flip through it.
Yeah.
Killian is a little caught off guard. He just looks at her for a second. I'd say in the few seconds before he speaks that she flips through, she sees a lot of just, I think, money, like a transaction, almost like a ledger. She doesn't see any names, though, in terms of like individual names. She might see like a name that might be like a company or a team or a group of people, sort of names, but not individuals. And she sees like that ledger sort of thing. And she sees those things. And then Killian says, "The book, please." And his voice is definitely a little more like, I need you to give that back. Much more than his other tone.
Yeah. Assuming that she can't see, because what she'd be specifically looking for, like qunari words that she could be like, oh, this is a person. Assuming she doesn't see that, she will just close the book and hand it to him.
Okay. He'll take it, and at this point, he kind of tucks it inside like his inner coat pocket. And he'll let out a sigh, and he'll say, look, Miss Rana, I understand that servant trade is a gray area. And for whatever reason, you feel inclined to come as your little old self to inquire about our ship's business. He says, clearly, you are but one person, and there needs to be no bloodshed or fighting today. So if I've answered your questions, I really do need to get going.
Pasha is very tight-lipped. She's clearly very frustrated with all of this.
He sees the frustration, I think, in her face, and he says, why is it that you have making this such a focus of yours? Is you're safe here in the Qun. These people will be safe in Tevinter. Why not just go about your daily life?
You cannot guarantee that. They would be safe under the Qun. They would lead happy, fulfilled lives. They wouldn't have to bow to people who think that are above them.
We do not make them bow to us, almost interjecting you when she suggests that. He's very adamant that one of them is good, to the point where I think you either believe him or you believe that he truly believes that.
Yeah.
He's very convinced of that. He'll say, and sure, we cannot guarantee every single one of them will be safe, he says, but I don't know that I believe you can guarantee this just the same, he says. I've given them their chance, and quite honestly, I'd probably have been killed if my captain were here to see that, but none of them left, ma'am. I implore, please, just go about your day before my captain comes back and sees you here.
She looks at him and, I am going, but I promise you, sir, this isn't over. And she's walking off. She is going to find someone higher up than her to complain.
Okay, so
she's going to speak to someone's manager.
At this point, we'll say, the captain's on his way back, and when he sees Pasha still there, he actually gives Killian kind of this disgusted look, as if, thought I told you to handle this. And at this point, he's not shy about his sword, to the point where he might even pull it out and just kind of like brandish it a little bit, and he'll say, oh, Killian, I thought I told you to take care of this one. She's still causing issues, I see.
Pasha turns, and she looks him up and down. A little sword for a little man. Are you going to actually do anything with that, or are you going to continue playing with it?
He'll kind of, you see him, it probably did strike a little bit of nerve in his face, and he says, I don't know who you are, ma'am. He says, but you really, really do not want to delay my business anymore. I thought my assistant here would have you out of my hair before I came back. He says, but I can assure you we've got all the paperwork we need. Signed, T's crossed, I's dotted. He says, so if you want to cause a stink, he says, it's on you.
Pasha laughs as soon as he mentions paperwork. And she just kind of says, do you really think qunari care about paperwork? Do you know so little of my kind?
He'll look around, and I think at this point, like, obviously you're alone. The docks are dying down. There's not many people. Business is coming to an end. He'll say, well, paperwork or no paperwork, you and what army are going to stop us from sailing off with our goods?
Not myself, personally, I am a woman, a teacher, but when the Arashok learns that you have kidnapped our people and presumably sends his full armada after you, these people were on qunari soil. They are ours, and we would not sell our kind. These are Tevinter lies. Do you truly want to deal with the full qunari fleet?
He'll say, well, we'll be ready when it comes. He'll kind of let out another sigh. He'll say, no, I think it is time that we are on our way. Killian, come aboard. And Killian just kind of shakes his head, and he kind of just, I think the look on his face is, you've given him something to consider, but you know, he's right behind his captain in terms of like, this is what we do. You know, it is what it is. And he begins to kind of like maybe unhook some ropes, and you see the rest of the crew kind of getting onto the ship.
What she does is she kind of walks to the end of the dock, presumably where is it called a gangplank? She's going to walk and she's going to stand at the edge of that. She's not blocking it, like presumably it's after everyone's gone aboard, but she's just going to stand there and she's watching.
And he'll just kind of let out another sigh, and he'll say, look, ma'am, I appreciate your enthusiasm, your passion, he says. I can't take that away from you, he says, but while we may have to agree to disagree, he says, you know, I like to think of myself as a good person, and I would not lie to you when I say that I do everything I can to make sure these people are taken care of. Yes, in return, they provide their service. But for that service, I assure you, many of the people in my family, my town, my area of Tevinter, many of us, we do use our wealth to take care of them as well. So while I understand your predicament, I hope you take some peace knowing that not all the slaves of Tevinter are as the stories say. Yes, some of them are. And yes, if there were an easy way for us to resolve that, I'm sure I would be open to that.
You might do everything you can for these poor people, but can you say the same of your captain?
He kind of just smirks and shakes his head, not necessarily answering, but I think you take that nonverbal cue as a no. And instead of answering verbally, he just says, have a good evening, ma'am. And he'll continue wrapping up the dock or whatever it is.
As he goes, she says to him, if I were you, I'd consider taking out the organ grinder. And she steps back.
Quite a job for one monkey, but...
Hello out there. I know we've only just met, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask for your help. You see, I'm looking for someone, and I don't think I can do it on my own. So if you would like to help me, make some noise for me, okay? And Dandelion, if you're out there, I'm coming. I hope.